Hurricane Lee is out to the southeast, and it's chugging along to the northwest as it takes aim for somebody. In the meantime, we've got a cold front approaching from the west, and flood watches are up. There's a shocker there. Rains 5 days in a row. You think there would be a flood watch, and there is. So we'll talk about all of that, try to figure out what the impacts of Lee are going to be and where those impacts are. That is all coming up right here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show on this Tuesday night, the 12th of September. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show, of course, is brought to you by our friends at Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Mulch, topsoil, and sand, salt this coming winter, and whatever you need to make sure your home looks good and is safe in case there's a tropical storm or a hurricane. 631-756-1125. You cannot possibly find better prices, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Tempest by Weatherflow, Joe. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you do decide to pick a purchase on the Tempest website, be it the Tempest weather station or any of the other wonderful gadgets and gizmos and weather fashion that they have, use the coupon code I want a weather station. And if you do, you'll get
a big 10% off.
Do you like all my inflections tonight? Just kind of
yes,
very
nice.
Very Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Are you making preparations for the weekend when the storm makes a sudden left hook and heads toward New York City?
Somehow, I don't think that's going to happen.
I'm beginning to think that's the same.
You're beginning to think that.
I'm beginning to think. Well,
Just let's make that clear that you're beginning to think that. So, first things first, let's talk about this next cold front that is approaching. I don't think, did anybody get any rain today?
Well, I can tell you that we had a lot more sunshine than what I was bargaining for. I thought we were going to have kind of a blend or mix of cloud and sun, but during the midday and afternoon, almost perfectly clear skies and blue skies too, Joe.
I noticed on the satellite you broke out wide open.
Yeah, so it turned out to be a lovely Tuesday, nicer than what I was expecting. And tomorrow, well, considerable cloud cover expected with the cold front. And it looks to me that we are going to be in line for showery rains, some of which could be heavy. And I'm thinking that most of it, the majority of the rain, is probably going to come before noontime tomorrow. It'll start breaking out, let's say, around, 3, 4 in the morning. And just about the time when the morning commute gets started, that's when we may see some spurts of moderate to heavy rainfall. The rain will taper off, I think, in the afternoon, but then we also have to worry or be concerned about maybe a little convection flaring up. So overall, I'm thinking that the best case scenario would be maybe like a half to 3/4 of an inch. But since the atmosphere is still going to be rather humid and there may be some thunderstorm activity, why don't we double that and say that the chances are that some folks may pick up 1, maybe 1.5, maybe 1 3/4 inches of rain out of all of this. And if it comes in a relatively short interval of time, say about 4 or 6 hours, that could lead to flash flooding, which is why we have flood watches in effect for parts of the tri-state area.
And hold on a second, because I'm hitting buttons on my. There we go. And
why would they get rid of the buttons and get zippers?
No. So I brought up the dew point map on the GFS because I was particularly impressed by it today, and actually. If you look across the Great Lakes, this is this evening, the plains, the Rockies, and in the west, the dew points are just wonderfully low. I mean, in the 40s. You actually don't have to go too far away to see dew points even in the upper 50s and low 60s. But once this front clears through, Joe, look at by Thursday morning, you've got 40 dew points, almost all the way down to me here in northern Georgia.
Wow.
I mean, really just nice air, dry air. And, of course, as the hurricane, and you can see it on the map, offshore. As the hurricane draws northward, it's going to pull more dry air down southward and keep it in the northeast and mid-Atlantic states right through Friday and Saturday. Starts to erode in the Carolinas, but I mean, still dew points in the 50s there come Saturday night and Sunday. No big deal. But I was rolling through this before, and there's some kind of other little system here. The hurricane goes in on the GFS at right over western Nova Scotia into the Bay of Fundy, and then weakens as it moves northeastward. But it just overwhelms the eastern part of the United States all of next week. I mean, I'm seeing 40 dew points, pretty much 40s or at worst low 50 dew points all week long. In fact, there's some 30 dew points by the end of next week. It's just a ton of dry air all over the place. And I think that will more than make up for this recent stretch of humidity, which has been abominable.
Absolutely. We're going to have a nice long stretch, I think, after the last showers exit here late tomorrow afternoon or early tomorrow evening. That pretty much is going to be it in terms of precipitation locally, probably for the rest of the week, the weekend, and right on into the middle of next week.
Oh, totally agreed. All right, let's set up what's going on. We'll take a look on the satellite loop of the. We'll use the U.S. loop now because Lee is in range inside the U.S. loop, and it's fairly well defined. You can see the eye once we go to the infrared after the sunset line moves along. You can see what looks like a fairly large eye that's out there. Before I continue, however, I would like to say a crisp, business-like good evening to everybody on the chat board tonight. Welcome to another round of the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Welcome to those of you who are not on the chat board but might just be lurking about in the background. We know all too well some of the people that lurk about in the background here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And Joe, there are quite a few famous people that, were they still alive, they probably would be watching us Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and occasionally on a Friday and Saturday if there's a storm around.
Well, we know that we're the place to get all your local and also national weather.
And occasionally international.
And occasionally international weather as well.
Yes, and every once in a while we take a trip up into the Arctic and the Antarctic and take a look at what's going on in places that, are not necessarily reachable.
Well, better than that. You talk about, taking a look at the Arctic and Antarctica. I mean, we actually have people on staff who have actually gone to Antarctica.
That's true.
Have televised from Antarctica.
That's correct. We did that last year.
Does Jim Cantori go to Antarctica?
Oh, good God, no.
Sorry, Jim. I didn't mean that.
One of these days I may run into him because he lives like 20 miles from here. So it's, up in Blue Ridge, from what I understand. Anyhow, what was I going to say? I was going to say, for those of you who are watching for the first time, hit the subscribe button and turn your notifications on so you don't miss the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And, of course, we've already gotten 52 likes, which is very impressive. We've been yapping for all of 10 minutes. But if you do like the Joe and Joe Weather Show and you like what we're doing and you just like it, hit the like button. Because it makes us happy when we get over 100 likes. That's our goal for the night, Joe.
And Joe Z on the chat board, he's actually apologizing, saying that he's actually old enough to remember Gordon Barnes on News Radio 88. Well, guess what? So does Joe, and so does Joe.
Right, we both do. Yeah, that's going back quite a ways.
Yes.
I always used to listen. I always made sure to listen at 4:06 because that was the first weathercast of the evening, an evening drive.
And Gordon Barnes not only gave you the weather for the next couple of days, but he also occasionally would give you the forecast for the next month. He would forecast storms. He'd give you a whole list. He says, all right, here's what we're expecting for the month of October. Storms on the 1st to the 3rd, the 7th through the 9th, the 15th through the 18th, and the 23rd to the 27th.
I don't know that I ever... Hold on a second. I got to close the back door because otherwise JJ barks at... the oncoming rodents that are moving along outside. Uh, anyway, I don't think I ever heard him do that, but I'm sure he did.
I did an air check. I have an air check somewhere buried in my tape archives or whatever, and he did that with the afternoon guys, Pat Parson and Ben Farnsworth, and at the end, Ben Farnsworth said, "Pat's got it all down with his crayon."
Nice. All right, let's look at this satellite because there's a lot going on. The old frontal boundary, Joe, kind of is washed out, but it's being replaced by a new front that is approaching from the west. You can see the clouds in western New York. I have the non-lightning loop going here, and those clouds extend down across the southern Appalachians, west across the Tennessee Valley, all the way back to Texas and New Mexico and Arizona. And then, of course, to the north of that, you can sort of see there's an upper trough that's swinging into the western lakes. It's kind of driving all this along, and that upper trough is going to be responsible for turning Lee to the north and driving it northward. It's gotten rather large in terms of the cloud, the diameter of the clouds from north to south and also from east to west. I mean, it has become a large hurricane. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a strong hurricane. It is to an extent. It's not like I'm saying it with respect to that being a Category 5. Just that it's got a large satellite signature.
Yeah, and in fact, it could be an interesting weekend because although the storm likely will stay well offshore relative to the tri-state New York metropolitan area, the fact is it's because of the overall width of this system that you could be in New York City under blue skies, brilliant sunshine, a fresh northwesterly breeze. But if you get in the car and say, I'm going to the Hamptons, I'm driving east on 495, and as you're driving east, you're going to drive right into a blanket of cloud cover, the peripheral back edge, the western edge of Lee, which may very well cover much of coastal Connecticut, most of Long Island, and a good part of central and eastern New England. Meanwhile, if you go to the west of New York City into Pennsylvania or New Jersey, it will be indeed a beautiful sunny day on Saturday. So that shows you the split personality, it looks like, of the weather this weekend. Forecasters, local forecasters are going to have to take that into account. That, they'll have to say, if you're going east, expect a lot of clouds. If you're going to the west, expect a ton of sunshine.
Also, the area of gales with this is expanding, and at the same time, and I'm just wondering, given the type, the storm itself, and you got not a half shabby high that's coming down, might tighten up the gradient a little along the immediate coast, say over, might get quite breezy for a while in eastern Long Island, in eastern Connecticut, Rhode Island, and certainly at Cape Cod. And in southeastern Massachusetts, I think it'll probably get downright windy there.
Well, I think, frankly, that right in here in the immediate New York area, we'll be seeing sustained winds on Saturday of around 20 miles an hour, and maybe occasionally a stronger gust to 25 or 30. And yeah, Joe, as you go east across Long Island, those winds are only going to pick up. So it is going to be kind of a breezy, a rather refreshing, invigorating kind of day on Saturday. But again, depending upon where you are, it's either going to be filled with sun or filled with a lot of clouds, thanks to the offshore antics of Lee.
Zim on the chat board, Joe, says, do you still think this storm is worth retiring in terms of the name? I remember a week or so ago you seemed pretty confident that they would. I wonder whether that's still the case. I tend to think, it did become a Category 5, but for a brief time. I think that it would have to do it would have to rival Fiona from last year when it went into Nova Scotia in terms of whatever damage. I hate to even bring up that concept with this, but just saying in terms of retirement, I don't know that this really, other than the fact that it briefly hit a Category 5 hurricane, whether that's enough for them to retire it.
I think that they may still do that, if for nothing else, because of the fact that it went from a it strengthened so radically, so rapidly over a span of just a day or so. It went from a 2 to a 4, and then briefly touched 5. And of course, then the shear took over, the southwest shear took over and knocked it back to a 3. But a lot of websites, a lot of places are pointing out the exceedingly rapid rate of intensification, and also using Lee as an example of what we may very well be accustomed to seeing more and more in the coming years ahead, because the ocean water temperatures are so very warm. It's not often you get a storm like this. Is it really necessary in order to retire a storm for it to do some kind of devastation, to cause billions of dollars of damage, or actually cause?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what their criteria is
I
to.
don't know either. But it's not like one of these storms where, oh, get out of here. What are you crazy? We're gonna retire this? But this may have some reason. Of course, it hasn't yet made landfall, and we'll see what happens. We'll see how this stacks up, as you just noted, Joe, to last year with Fiona, which did probably some of the worst damage that Nova Scotia has ever seen. Will this have a similar fate for Nova Scotians this weekend? And ironically, too, just like Fiona, this storm looks like it's going to make landfall on Nova Scotia on a weekend, on a Saturday.
Yeah, the ocean where Lee is traveling. Bill Goodman sent me the link to this graphic, which I think is really useful, showing the water temperatures and then overlaying the track of the storm over those water temperatures, and the yellow area that you see in the Southwest Atlantic, that sort of brownish and then yellow areas, those water temperatures there are cold. I mean, cold from the standpoint of supporting a tropical storm. You need the water temperatures to be, if you're gonna carry a Category 3 hurricane, or higher, you're gonna want water temperatures that are sitting above 28 C, or about 84 Fahrenheit. Well, those water temperatures are down closer to or even under 80 in that area from the Carolinas to Bermuda and northward, and mainly because of the fact that we had Franklin did a lot of upwelling. Franklin took a long time to move through this region, and that was, of course, had strengthened. That got to a 4, didn't it? That got to a Category 4.
I think so.
Yeah, that upwelled a lot of water. And Idalia, when it was post-tropical or semi-tropical or whatever it was, when it was moved off the North Carolina coast and went toward Bermuda, just added to that upwelling on top of it. So a lot of that water has been really cooled considerably by as much as 5 to 7 degrees from the peaks. So this is why you see where they have this labeled as a 3, and then a 2, 2, 2, and then a Category 1, weakening to a Category 1. It briefly hits the Gulf Stream wall, which is that streak of dark red that is up at around 36, more like 37, 38 north. But that's a very, very short distance that it crosses, and then it goes into the really cool water that is just to the north of that, and of course up into the Gulf of Maine and into Nova Scotia. That's at that point you start to say, okay, is this becoming more of a non-tropical cyclone, what is referred to as a post-tropical cyclone, which sometimes can be quite formidable if it's moving fast enough. It could certainly produce, post-tropical cyclones have been known to produce some very strong wind gusts if they're accelerating to the north. So we'll have to see when we get there in the next couple of days. And just to show you some of the other system, of course, is Margot, which is right now over warm water. It's funny, I was reading the discussion. I don't know if you read the discussion to Margot, Joe, but apparently there is a 27-degree spread across what they pretty much said in their discussion. After the next 60 hours, we have no idea what's going to happen in terms of the track, because the spread on all the models is as much as 1,500 miles.
Wow.
From one point to another in terms of the ensemble spread of all the members. They are just absolutely all over the place.
In other words, it's like the spaghetti tracks, unlike what we've been seeing with Lee, which has been almost straight and true in most cases. what you're saying here is for Margot that it will the track will eventually evolve into something resembling a chrysanthemum, so to speak.
Right, pretty
Which way?
much. 97L will be traversing some very warm water over the next number of days, and there's a 80% probability that this will become a tropical depression or a tropical storm once it's done absorb. We are a G-rated show, but we have to mention that 97L will be absorbing 98L in short order. And the surviving system is forecast to become a depression or probably a tropical storm or a hurricane down the road because all the models seem to have it. And we had Franklin, to a lesser extent and in a bit of a weirder way, Idalia, Lee, and maybe this one will wind up following a similar track because they all seem to want to go somewhere between Bermuda and the Carolinas this year. So I wouldn't be shocked to see that this next one, which will be the end storm, which is Nate, I think.
No.
No, I'm sorry, Nigel. Sorry, my memory faded me for a second. But that Nigel may follow a similar track, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. Lee, at the moment, at 5 o'clock, we have tropical storm watches up for Bermuda, although the center of the hurricane will pass a fair distance to the west, but the area of gales is so wide now that I think it goes up out almost, I'll have to check on can you check the marine advisory? I don't want to just throw a number out there. You check the marine advisory to see what the area of gales are, Joe?
I will check.
24/7, 66/4. Top wind still at 115. Pressure dropped a little bit today. I think it's down to 946 or 945. Moving northwest at 7. And a gradual turn to the north. Then maybe going east of north for a while, kind of hooking back to the north or even going west of north for a while. And they have it as a hurricane when it's just off the west coast of Nova Scotia. And then as it moves through New Brunswick by Sunday afternoon, they have it post-tropical. It might still not be quite fast enough, but they're catching up in terms of their forecast. And the tracking models, the latest tracking model guidance is you have the western outliers have been. There's still a couple of western outliers, but now they're further east. So you have one outlier that goes into Maine. I think that's to the west of Bangor or near Bangor, and then another one that touches the southeastern tip of Maine there in the Bay of Fundy. But the vast majority of them are all clustered around the western part of Nova Scotia, moving on a north-northeast or north-northeast course, heading up into New Brunswick, and then by that time again it'll be post-tropical, then making the right turn and going. So I really don't, like we said at the beginning, this is not going to change very much, if at all, at this point. Looks pretty much spot on. And you can see that while a few of these models hold this as a Category 3 hurricane for maybe another 60 hours or so, they do all start to weaken it gradually, and then the weakening becomes a bit more rapid after 84 hours. And a lot of these models have it down to a tropical storm, but by that point, it's 84 hours from now we'll be at Friday night and Saturday, and on up it goes into Canada. So the GFS, you can follow it here, and then I'll switch to the Canadian view for our friends in the Canadian Maritime provinces, because we do have folks that watch from there. We like that. So there's your hurricane. And you can see what happens with this cold front, Joe. Moves on through, showers and storms into the afternoon, then done. And then that dry air comes in because the high builds in. The hurricane's moving north-northeast, kind of takes a bend back north or even west of north come Friday night into Saturday morning, goes over the western part of Nova Scotia, and then moves out to the east. And as I said, let me get the Canadian view. Did you find that area of gales yet?
Yeah, according to the National Hurricane Center, Lee is a very large hurricane. Hurricane force winds currently extend outward up to 125 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds, we're talking about 39 mile per hour sustained, extend outward up to 240 miles. And they have something called Sail Drone 1036, located 70 miles northwest of the center of Lee, recently reported a wind gust to 92 miles per hour.
Wow.
They're also talking about the swells that are being generated by Lee. They're saying that it is affecting portions of the Lesser Antilles, the British and U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, the Turks and Caicos Islands, Bahamas, Bermuda. Swells are likely to cause life-threatening surf and rip current conditions. Dangerous surf and rip currents are currently also affecting parts of the southeastern U.S. coast, and these conditions are forecast to spread northward up along the coast to much of the U.S. East Coast and Atlantic Canada during the next 2 days. And they say, please consult your latest marine products from your local weather office. So it looks like, how does Lee look? Swell.
Yes. So from the view from southeastern Canada, you'll notice a couple of things when it comes into view here. And this is, I'm going to make this map just a little bit smaller. This is by Friday night. Let's reduce this a little bit. There we go. And this is Friday night. The light green. Now, sometimes this is supposed to be the GFS's radar presentation, and sometimes the light green is precip that's not even reaching the ground. So I would just kind of focus maybe on the darker greens. It actually, Friday night, 2 a.m. Saturday morning, Joe, the light green echoes are just about to, Riverhead and, west of Hartford. The darker greens, though, which I think would probably be some steadier rains, just touching southeastern Rhode Island and over the Cape. And then you even have a band of dark green over Montauk and Block Island Saturday morning. But notice that as this tracks further north, the heavy rains, as typically happens with these things, as they come further north, the heaviest rain shifts to the west side, and the stronger winds will be on the east side because that has the momentum and the direction of motion of the storm in itself in play. It's moving south to north. So, as far as rainfall is concerned, say it goes into western Nova Scotia, the heaviest rains are going to probably be over eastern Maine and in New Brunswick, and not some rain that comes in ahead of it during the Friday afternoon, Friday night into early Saturday. But then as the storm center approaches, there's not a whole lot going on east of the center as far as rain is concerned. Then, of course, it'll just pull away to the northeast after that. You notice it does weaken rather quickly once it gets into the Bay of Fundy on the GFS. I think that's a fair assessment of how this is going to play out.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you on that on all counts. And I'm happy that for the better part of the last week, I've been saying, and this is all based upon empiricism and maybe just gut instinct, but I've been saying that I think the worst of this is going to be from Cape Cod to the down East Maine and into Nova Scotia. I really did not think that we would see very much from this system locally here in the New York area. Although, again, I think the winds will get a bit gusty here on Saturday. And again, Joe was talking about the shades of light green, indicating precip that probably won't even reach the ground, covering portions of Long Island. And that's what I was alluding to. The fact that the back end, the western periphery of Lee, is going to be very likely very sharp. And so you will go from brilliantly blue, sunny skies. You drive eastward, you'll drive right into the western edge of Lee and go right into a rather significant cloak of cloud cover. And folks who say, "Oh, I'm going to the Hamptons this weekend," well, you can go, but the weather isn't exactly, I think, going to be your cup of tea between the wind gusts, the cloud cover, and maybe even the spotty precipitation.
Well, it will get better there, though. Sunday looks like it's okay.
Oh yeah, well,
yeah,
because
and even Saturday, if there's clouds and some gusty wind, all right, maybe you won't be able to sit on the beach, but it's not like it's going to be pouring rain over eastern the eastern half of Long Island.
Even at places like Jones Beach and Robert Moses State Park, this may actually be, I'm not saying it's going to be crowded, but there are a lot of people when we get into this type of a situation that go down to the shore and go down to the beach just to take a look at the waves crashing into the shoreline, take a look at the swells and whatever. They want to see the rough seas. Renata and I did that. We were married. I think that was the first year that we were married. I think we're talking about 1984. There was a hurricane by the name of Josephine, which was coming up the coast. It was predicted to make a sharp turn back out to sea, but it kept coming and kept coming, and it came close enough so that we said to ourselves, "Man, why don't we go to the beach and see what the shore looks like?" We were surprised. There were a lot of other people who had the same idea, so that may very well be the case on Saturday. A lot of people going to the beach, hopefully not stupid enough to actually try to go into the water, unless maybe if you're a surfer, but just take a look at the crashing waves and
Yes.
high swells and rough seas that are going to be generated again by this major storm offshore.
And I've switched over to the Atlantic view because you can see Lee to the east of that is Margot, and to the south of Margot, this is by Friday night, you have on the GFS Tropical Storm Nigel. And I keep wanting to say Nate. So there you go. And that, at least we've got the maps up, might as well show it. So it moves initially northwestward, and then it turns westward because Lee is pulling away to the northeast, and assuming that Margot's doing the same, as the Hurricane Center said, they're not really sure what it's going to do track-wise. That allows a ridge to build from the Azores westward to Bermuda, and Nigel will turn westward underneath that ridge for a while. And then, at least on this run, it turns it up at 60. Now, the European has a bit more of a different idea here, where it's got it to the left of that and left of Bermuda. In fact, I'll switch over to the European, and you'll see what the European did with this. But the models all have something, which is, whenever they all have something, it's almost a certainty that it's going to happen. But you can see the European is further west with it, and then it's got it northwest of Bermuda by a not a large distance. And when you look at the upper air pattern, Joe, with this, when I looked at it, it was I looked at it and I just thought, you know what? Are we going to have another week of drama from run to run? Because this is what the upper air looks like, where you have a low that cuts off. And the GFS is not that different from this, by the way. It's just it's a little bit further east in how it's oriented. But it's got a cutoff low that forms over Lake Ontario and goes southwestward into Ohio. And you can see that Nigel's getting caught by that upper low. And I looked at this and I said, okay, if I had to extend this 48 hours, where would I take it? I thought, I don't know. This is not an upper air setup that I want to see for later next week, which of course is going to change multiple times between now and then. But still, this was a bit of a surprise.
Well, let's see what happens. Didn't they have Nigel coming directly over New York City?
A few runs have, but you got this big, you've got this upper high that supposedly builds on the European across from Lake Superior, on the Canada side of Lake Superior, all the way into eastern Canada. In fact, heights are rising all across the eastern half of Canada. So you got this cutoff low here. I don't know where that cutoff's going to go. I mean, is it going to drop southward? Is it going to move? I mean, I hope it moves eastward, because then that would probably force us to go out. But, what if it drops southward or southwestward? Then who knows what the outcome would be. But again, this is sort of open air speculation on what will probably be completely different in about 6 hours when the new run comes out. So, why I'm wasting my time on it is beyond.
Well, I mean, why don't we check? There are a couple of stations here in the New York metropolitan area who actually do 10-day outlooks. So maybe we ought to check and see what their 10-day outlook.
You mean do they have a hurricane watch up?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I kind of think they wouldn't. I'm waiting for the day, though, on those 10-day foots on the apps because we haven't really quite had it. I guess maybe I should have checked. Uh, on one of these, if we get one of these runs where it goes up the coast and it's inside the 10-day time frame, and you got one of these apps that goes out 10 days or 15 days, I'd be curious to see what the computer generated forecast is. You know, sunny, 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 hurricane.
Yes.
Sunny, 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 sunny. Something like that.
In fact, I work for a private weather forecasting service, which I will not mention the name. Don't want to give them any publicity or whatever. But right about the time when I left them, they had just developed an app which did exactly what you had suggested. The app just simply took the raw data, the raw model guidance information, and translated it into a few, English words. And you're exactly right. I mean, like, sunny, 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 cloudy, hurricane, by the time you reached day 10 or day 12 or whatever.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Joe.
This is not, one of the things I was saying to the hierarchy, the supervisors, was this is not good. I mean, that we were selling this service to roofers, to people who, want to know if it's going to rain and know whether or not they should take a roof off before doing that. And, I said, this is not right. I mean, like, we have to somehow inject a little human component into this to massage it, so to speak. Oh, but we got like 90 of these clients. You want to do that for 90 clients? Just do, And it was not too long after that I said, thank you very much. I'm moving on to something else. And
I want to just say something here. May I say something?
Certainly.
Okay, Robert Hill, what delusional world do you live in? And I've already told you on a post that you on a comment that you made on YouTube to cut the crap. But I mean, seriously, very bad news for the East Coast, who is very desperate for rain. Where? That there's a drought, and you keep putting up this crap about 10-year droughts and all this other nonsense. I'm seriously, I'm about this close to blocking you completely from this channel, because I'm really tired of you doing this from time to time. It's hacking me off. So knock it off. Thank you. That's all. Now we can resume our regular programming.
That's why I had to do remediation on my home about a couple of months ago, because I had rain or water coming into my office, because we were getting so much. We had like 9 inches of rain. I mean, you got to be kidding me, Robert. I mean, like, the East Coast.
The whole state of Vermont has been underwater for the whole summer. I mean, where do you come up with this crap? Because that's what it is. It's crap. Anyway, I'm sorry. You know what? I purged sometimes I need to do that, because, we get to 7:30 at night at my age, you just start to think, you know what? That bed is looking really good. But, one good rant just can just get my energy going. And Brandon Doherty hitting Super Chat, hit the tip jar. Thank you, Brandon. And likes up to 114. Thank you very much for those of you who hit the like button. So if you haven't hit the like button and you like the show, then guess what? Hit the like button, and we appreciate it. All right, let's take a look at what's happening radar-wise tonight, because we do have some activity, Joe. Started thinking about the Pittsburgh rule a little while ago, that what happens there gets to eastern PA to southern New England in about 6 to 8 hours, and there's actually quite a decent line of storms of downpours and maybe a few thunderstorms in the mix. Nothing severe, just outside of Syracuse on the northern end, then cuts into Pennsylvania. Looks like it's just west of Williamsport, south and west from there to about Altoona, or just east of Altoona. Then you get a little bit of a break. Then there's some stronger storms in central Virginia, central North Carolina, central South Carolina, southeast Georgia. So all of this is just sort of moving along, and this is going to be the rainmaker for tomorrow. Got a couple of lines of storms tonight moving through Wisconsin, and another one in northwestern Illinois. Showery rains across the southwest and also in central Texas. The Storm Prediction Center Now they have a marginal risk, Joe, of severe weather for the overnight period tonight into tomorrow morning from western New Jersey, much of eastern and south central PA, Maryland, down into Virginia, North Carolina. Some of that's going on now in Virginia, particularly North Carolina. Western interior South Carolina, northern Georgia, which I had a really wicked thunderstorm here around 4 o'clock this afternoon. Eastern Tennessee, eastern Kentucky. So maybe some of those cells might fire up a little stronger in the early morning. One of those deals when a front comes through and you get, strong storms in the early morning hours when they're moving through eastern PA or into western Jersey.
I'm looking here on the chat board, and one of our people, his name is Foreskin. Foreskin. And it says hello from Fort Kent. Now wait a minute, is Rainix 12 from Fort Kent, or is it Foreskin from Fort Kent?
Oh my God, that's like one vowel away from complete trouble. Oh my Lord. Oh God. Well, he might want to get together. He might want to get together with Latex Dreams.
No, I think actually, yeah, I think it's Foreskin, not Rainix. And I only say that because I used to do for a few years. I used to do the weather on a radio station up in Fort Kent. There were actually two stations, Madawaska and Fort Kent, Maine, WSJR and WLVC. I don't think either one of them exist anymore. One was 500 watts, the other was 250. They both went off at sunset. I actually used to do, Joe, on that station when I did the weather. I did the potato growing index. Now, a lot of people aren't aware of this. I mean, when you think of potatoes and a state where they come from, a lot of people immediately think of Idaho. But up in Maine,
Maine and also in Nova Scotia is big on potatoes.
Yeah. So I mean, and in fact, there was a time on Eastern Long Island where
Long Island used to be until the developers came in and turned them into grape vineyards and charged people, hundreds of dollars just to sit around and look at grapes and drink wine in the afternoon.
I remember I went out there. There's an observatory out in the eastern part of Long Island, the Custer Institute. And when I was out there, I passed by. There was a guy. He was selling potatoes. I bought 75 pounds of potatoes for $5.
Nice.
I thought it was a great deal. And here I am. I come into the house. I said, "Hey, Ma, look what I got." And her eyes bulged out. She said, "What the blankety blank do you expect me to do with all of that?" I said, "Yeah, but Mom, it was only $5. Look at all the potatoes. We'll be."
That's too funny. From David Fuller.
No more. The developers have taken care of that.
Yeah, all gone.
Yeah.
David Fuller hitting a super chat. Thank you, David. Does this mean an extra half-hour show now, Joe? I hope not. Love these shows. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much, David. Most appreciated. Do you see the risk there? There's even a 2% tornado risk for southeast and south central PA down into Maryland. And then on day 2, and this is for tomorrow, SPC actually expanded the marginal risk. Now it's from central New England southwest to cover much of New Jersey except the southwestern part of the state. So earlier today it was mostly over Connecticut, Long Island, and Rhode Island, but they've made it a little bit bigger, and I wouldn't be shocked if they make it even bigger by the time we get to their forecast during the overnight. Marginal risk coastal Carolinas, marginal risk in West Texas and eastern Mexico for tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we're looking at no thunderstorms at all from Maine to, all the way down until you get down to near the Gulf Coast, and then back up into the plains where we've got general thunderstorms and no severe weather. And as far as rainfall is concerned over the next 7 days, you can see big rain amounts in down east Maine, over Nova Scotia, over New Brunswick, several inches. And, of course, most of that is driven by whatever the track of Lee is. 1.5 inch amounts back into Connecticut. That's some of that. Most of that on the western end of that is from this frontal boundary that's moving through, and not really very much from the tropical system. And certainly the 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, which could be double in some heavier downpours for eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. That is all from this front that's moving through tomorrow, because there's nothing after that. And, that kind of on the drier side in the eastern half of the United States. Texas, on the other hand, some substantial rains for central Texas in the area that's been dealing with so much heat this summer, finally getting into some substantial rainfall, which is good. Also central and south Florida, The West Coast is mostly dry. And I think we got another super chat hit here as our likes just continue to climb, Joe. We're at 127. This is, let's
That from Johnny
see,
Quest?
Johnny Quest. Can you possibly, Joe, can you explain what happened over Libya? In Libya, there was a storm there that killed thousands and over 10,000 are missing. Yeah, I saw that news story, Joe, and for the life of me, I really didn't, the first thing I thought of was we've had these, we've been calling them Medicanes because we've been having these systems that sort of look like tropical systems forming in the Mediterranean Sea over the last number of years. I don't know if that's what this was. And in fact, I could just, pull up. I can't go look at the past, so it's hard for me to see what's going on here. And this map gives you the north coast of Libya, so it's not, obviously it's not doing much here. I could go back 3 days on the upper air, so maybe that'll give us a clue. Let's take a look.
I've never been to Libya. I have been to Malta, and I once went through a major storm at sea on the Mediterranean. That's something I really don't ever want to do again. But the weather can get pretty rough in that part of the world, especially I guess at this time of the year.
On this 500 millibar map, I'll switch to the GFS. There was a cutoff low of some kind off the coast, the north coast of Libya there. So I wonder if that was one of those Medicanes that we've seen. I got to do a little research on this to see what the deal was, but there certainly was a deep upper, for there that upper low isn't, you don't always see them down in this area, but there was a strongish upper low there that's being indicated, and that moved across northeastern Libya and then opened up and then just lifted up into a trough when it moved into the eastern part of the Mediterranean, going into Israel and Lebanon. But that must be it right here. So for those of you who not sure, it's this thing right there. That's.
I don't mean to laugh, but Leon Probitsky, when I mentioned the fact that I once visited Malta, he said Baron Mikhail Cicluna was from the Isle of Malta. Baron Mikhail Cicluna was a famous pro wrestler.
Oh, is that who that? I was wondering, like, what?
That's who Baron Mikhail Cicluna.
Brandon Doherty just gave me a link here, so I'm going to take a look at it. See what that says. This is from CNN. The Libyan was from storm flooding. 500,000 catastrophic flooding, breaks dams, blah, blah, blah. Trying to see, okay. Whole neighborhood's been washed away. Dead bodies left outside in morgues. So that's a lovely picture. This was ferocious, in quotes, Joe, weather conditions. Rain, which swept across several cities, is the result of a very strong. That must be that upper low. It must have been some kind of surface. Yeah, look, they even mentioned it, Joe. They said in the article that brought catastrophic flooding to Greece last week and moved into the Mediterranean before developing into a tropical-like cyclone known as a Medicane.
Right.
So maybe that's what it was. I don't have a surface map that I could look at, but that's probably what it was. And we've seen that a few times in the last 3 or 4 years. We've even showed it on the air here.
Right.
So that's that.
And the executive producer on the intercom a few moments ago, she was reading an article about this, and she said on the intercom, "It's a Medicane." So
it is a Medicane. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna in another few months. No, never mind. Not gonna say that. Okay. Let's. You have Briller Jeopardy. We've got a little bit of time. If you want to do it tonight, let's do it.
Might as well. And while I'm looking for it, maybe you ought to make a decision about tomorrow night, because I have a library
8:30 tomorrow night
for New City. Okay, so it is. It's 8:30.
8:30. We'll do a show at 8:30. I'll be a mess, but we'll do a show at 8:30.
Well,
I'll try to I don't know. Maybe I'll have a cup of coffee at around 6 o'clock to help keep me awake.
I'm trying to find this now. Where Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. Come on, Joe Rayo. Facebook, Joe Rayo this.
I've got my pad here. Okay, so I've got my
Well, I thought that's what you
Briller
live.
Jeopardy pad, so that when I have to figure out what the answers are, I could scribble on my pad.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. Scott Driller. Yes, this actually dates back to last Friday, so we haven't had a chance to do that. So, on this edition of Briller Jeopardy, what are the top 5 highest wind speeds of a hurricane in the Atlantic Basin? The top 5 highest wind speeds of a hurricane in the Atlantic Basin.
In other words, with the storms that produce the top 5.
Right.
So I guess whatever it was in the advisory. So I'll say, I think. Why don't I say? What's the G storm I'm trying to think of? What's the G storm in the 80s?
Well, Johnny Quest already has one of them. In fact, Johnny Quest has the top number 1 storm of the 5. But Johnny, can you give us an idea of what the mile per hour of sustained winds were with that particular storm? He says Allen in 1980, and that is number 1.
Did it carry 185 on the advisory?
A little higher.
190.
190.
Okay.
That, if I'm correct, I believe Allen was in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes, it was. It crossed all the way.
Yes.
All the way. All right, so 190 for Allen. What about Gilbert?
Gilbert is on that list. It is actually, now we have a 4-way tie
for second.
For second.
So I will say it's either 185 or 180. So I'll say 185.
And you're correct.
All right, so 4 storms had 185. So Gilbert was one of them.
Right.
Michael Azara says Mitch and Wilma.
Wilma, yes. Mitch, no.
No. Okay. Let's see.
We're down to 2.
We're down to 2 in the Atlantic Basin. 185. Dorian, says Johnny Quest.
Dorian is number 4 on the chairman's list, although it is a tie actually for second place. There's 1 left.
1 left, 185, and I'm just trying to think here. Maybe Katrina when it hit its peak.
No, Rich Rothmansky did get it though.
Rita?
No, the Labor Day storm
of 38.
Key West 35.
35. I'm sorry, right, 35. Oh, very interesting.
Yes.
Was that it for tonight?
No, there's
more. Oh my God, there's more.
Yes.
Go on.
How about what tropical depression took the fewest hours, only 12, to grow into a hurricane in the Atlantic Basin? What tropical depression took the fewest hours, 12 hours, to grow into a hurricane in the Atlantic Basin?
Well, I mean, I remember reading the advisories from with Camille. The first advisory with Camille was a tropical storm. They flew in thinking it was still a tropical wave, and they found the tropical storm with 70-mile-an-hour winds. So it never got labeled as a tropical depression. I have no clue.
Well,
I'm trying to think of the ones that have strengthened really rapidly. There was one in the tropical Atlantic once where it was like a tropical depression, and then they wrote an advisory for a tropical storm, and then I think the next advisory they made it a hurricane, but I don't remember the name of it. It wound up dying out before it got to the islands. It was one of those early season ones. But
I'll give you a hint. This was a very popular name in more than a few episodes of The Honeymooners.
Well, let me ask you, Alice. Was this a hurricane that did something? Is known, It made
Yes,
landfall
it did.
someplace.
Yes, it hit. It made landfall over south central Texas.
And it's a
And
retired name.
it is a retired name, and it dropped. This is not on the key here that
Right.
Cameron gave me, but I'm remembering from off the top of my head. I believe it brought something like 50 inches of rain to Houston, Texas,
And it was a hurricane.
and it
And
was a hurricane.
right. And it's not Carla.
No, it's not Carla.
Not Carla. It's not Beulah. I know that.
Well, again, think about a famous name from Honeymooners lore. The guy who Ralph said he was going to twist into a pretzel.
Harvey.
Harvey, yes.
Harvey. Yes. Harvey.
Although I might say that this Harvey was not the Harvey I just described. The Harvey that brought all that rain, eventually led to a retirement, came like 20 years later. But in 1981, there was a Harvey, and Harvey apparently went from tropical depression to a hurricane in a matter of just 12 hours' time.
Right. But that storm did not have notoriety because the name still appeared after that.
Right.
So, okay. So there was Harvey. All right. Gotcha.
All right. Number 3, what was the last hurricane to make landfall in North Carolina? And here's a hint, it gave Joe and I fits in trying to figure out exactly how you pronounce the name.
Oh my God.
I'll tell you what, Joe. I'll give you the date and the year. August 3 and 4, 2020.
Well, not August 3rd and 4th. Not Isaias. Or however was that
See,
the one?
it's even giving you trouble now, 3 years later.
Yeah, because I don't remember how to pronounce it.
It's Isaias.
Who ever looked at that and said, I mean, not to make fun of anybody who has that as a name, okay? But, you need a marketing person to kind of be there when they come up to these names and just say, you know what, this might not, this may not work. Why can we find something that works? But it's retired, so it's gone. It's done.
And here's the last question. I have to chuckle here because, well, you'll realize why I'm chuckling when I tell you what the answer is, unless you get the answer. When was the last time Mississippi had a direct hit from a hurricane? Mississippi.
Well, Camille went into Biloxi. God, I'm trying to remember when I was in New Orleans. Did we have anything that went into?
Used to be so hard to spell. It used to make me cry. But since I studied spelling, it's just like pumpkin pie. Mississippi.
Oh God!
You talk about Harvey. The old Harvey tunes.
Yes.
With Casper and Herman and Catnip. They used to have cartoons where you'd see the bouncing ball and used to sing songs. And one of them was about Mississippi. Believe it or not, all these years later, when I try to spell Mississippi, I think of that song.
Oh God. Louis Aricio and Johnny Quest both mentioning Ivan or Ivan.
I'm going to tell you right now, Joe, you have mentioned this hurricane name, more than once tonight. And in fact, Leon Probitsky hit it. No, it's not Nathaniel. No, it's not Nigel. It's
Nate.
Nate. From October of 27.
I know. I've had it. Franklin, I wanted to make Frederick. Idalia, I wanted to make Vidalia because I use them in the Vidalia onions I like to use in cooking. And for some reason, I've got Nate on my mind for Nigel. Love, it's wonderful getting old, isn't it?
And Nigel would have been Nate because these names recur on a 6-year interval. So if it was October of 2017, this would have been the year for Nate.
So Nate was retired.
Nate was retired.
Well, see, you know what? I don't know. Some reason I get these names in my head and I can't get rid of them. All right, we've had enough fun for tonight. So thanks to the 143 people excuse me, that hit the like button. It's very nice that you do like the show. Makes us feel good. Thank you very much. And we're going to be tomorrow night. We'll be at 8:30. Okay, so 8:30 tomorrow night. The Joe and Joe Weather Show. Brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link's at the top of the chat board. It's on the descriptor to this video. Give it a look. And if you make a purchase on the website of anything there, use the coupon code I want a weather station. And if you do, you'll get
10 big % off.
Omni True Value Hardware, your go-to place for mulch, topsoil, sand over the winter, salt, and of course, whatever you need to make sure your home is looking good and safe from tropical storms and hurricanes. 631-756-1125 is the phone number. 1226 North Wellwood Avenue, the address. They have the best prices in town. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
all right. 99, everybody.
Good night, folks.